security notice for the Saigon-Cholan area. There will be no travel, either by foot or vehicle, on Plantation Road until further notice, except as directed by military police. All personnel are cautioned to stay out of the vicinity of the Puto racetrack and the area immediately south of the track and extending to Cholan. That is, no travel on Plantation Road until further notice, and orders to avoid the Puto racetrack area and the area south of the track extending to Cholan.
A man intending on entering the Army needs guidance in many question answers. That's the job of the Army recruiter. And right now, many new recruiters are needed. Specifically needed are mature, experienced NCOs with a broad knowledge of the Army and the excellent career opportunities it offers. Applications must be submitted between 6 and 8 months prior to your DROS. For more information, check with your unit personnel officer.
This is called Queen Bee War Remnants Museum, and this is like if you travel around America in the countryside, you can come upon some little so-called museums in the middle of nowhere. They're advertised as museums, but what they really are could be some little wooden shed, maybe in some guy's back garden kind of thing. And in that would be his collection or his enthusiasm of anything, like Museum of the American Indian, or maybe his motorbike or car or whatever car collection. In this case, it would be like stuff about war. So this guy's collection of stuff that he's built up throughout his life about war, and you know, it's like an anti-war statement. It's about the war in Iraq, as far as I'm concerned, although the stuff that's in it isn't directly about the war with Iraq. It's like wars in general. A lot of the stuff is about the Vietnam War, which you know, because I've worked there a lot of my work has been about the Vietnam War, and so I have that kind of material to work with. There's stuff about other wars, like the Second World War. I'm from Northern Ireland, so there's stuff here about what happened in Northern Ireland, stuff about the Korean War, several wars. Half of the stuff is original artwork done by me, and about half of the stuff is stuff I've collected about wars, like memorabilia, souvenirs, whatever you want to call it. And that would be stuff that I collected either as research for other artworks of mine, or specifically for this museum. So let's see. I mean, if we start here, these are artworks of mine. They're conceptually, they would be posters for Queen Bee Bar, like posters to advertise the bar, posters of what would happen in the bar, like sexy girls who could be entertainers in the bar, or bar girls or something like that, and they could be, you know, around the time to advertise the bar. You know, they're old looking, they're kind of fucked up looking. This one has squint in the frame. That's all intentional, because they're meant to be old or worn or aged in some way or damaged in some way, because they're like real objects, not pristine artworks, you know. We look up here, these are propaganda posters from Vietnam, the Vietnam warrior with America, and translated, this one for example, this is Ho Chi Minh, which most people know. This other guy was the president of Laos, small country neighbouring Vietnam, and the gist of the poster is that Laos and Vietnam should join forces to fight America. Then if we go down to here, these are original woodblock prints from the Vietnam War era, although I bought these recently in Vietnam. They're still available in Vietnam. Translated, this would say something like, if they come to our country, they never leave. You know, and the illustration is the American pilot being shot down, and the locals coming with sort of handmade weapons or something like this, these things, or this, she's got a gun, to take him prisoner, and kind of like, well, now he's going to stay here, kind of thing. Something like that. This is my motorcycle collection, which is here only because I'm very proud of it. Then these are about Northern Ireland. My mum gave me these, and these are Belfast Telegraph and Peace at Last. So obviously it's whatever the peace process came about over there. And more stuff about Northern Ireland. These, for example, sort of propaganda from before. That one thing that's famous in Belfast or Northern Ireland in general are the wall paintings, political murals, which they're trying to get rid of now, and also now that the war is kind of over, they're deteriorating, so they're disappearing anyway. So they're sort of becoming sort of a rare thing, and you know, so it's about kind of the war being over and now the imagery is disappearing and as peace is coming by. So they are. Let's see. These drawings up here are from Cold Slang Prison in Cambodia, which is a former concentration camp. It's now a museum, and the Khmer Rouge would take people there for, well, interrogation, but that sounds probably nicer than reality, for torture, and then would be executed. And everybody was tortured and everybody was executed. It was as simple as that. There was no way out of it. If you went there, that's what happened to you. And anybody who went there would know that's what would happen to them. But whenever they would arrive, they would be photographed, documented. So it's famous. Lots of people have been there. Lots of artists have taken some interest in it, actually. Because there's all these photographs which look just kind of like passport photographs, with a sort of a blank stare in most of the people. And of course, I think you automatically begin to think what's going on inside this person's head, because they look kind of quite normal. But I don't imagine they were thinking in a normal way at that time. So then if we move around here, this is my version of a club, which is described, in fact, in this book, used in what they call Romper Room in Northern Ireland. Romper Room is the name of a children's program in the 70s, whenever I lived there. And Romper Room was like a playroom for kids on TV. And they kind of coined the phrase in Northern Ireland at that time for a room where you would take people to torture them. So this would have been used in Romper Room. I made this in, going by a description in this book of something they would have made to torture people with. So as you can imagine, if somebody whacked you in the head with that, you wouldn't be in very good shape after it. They would try to keep people alive maybe for 12 or 24 hours during this torture, and try to prolong the torture as long as possible. But that's what that's from. This stuff is about the Second World War, letters from my wife's father and her grandfather from the Second and First World War. Letters home to family members. They're very interesting because they're very personal things. They're not written in a sensationalist way. In fact, they're well written in the opposite to that. They're trying to not worry the family members back home. But if you take the time to read through them, there's very subtle mentions in them of terrible things kind of happening during wartime. Let's see. This, I think, is interesting. This is part of a series of these kinds of paintings, and this is sexual propaganda, which is used in wartime, but not many people know much about it because it's sort of not widely publicised by anybody. I guess that whenever they do it, they're not particularly proud of it or something, I don't know. So people don't seem to know much about it, but I've done some research and I come up with it. So this is my version of something which could have been used in the Vietnam War. And in this case, the communists would have done this, and they would leave it for American soldiers to find somewhere where American soldiers might go. And the usual theme is like, it says, hey, I fucked you, go home now, your wife fucked many without you. Of course, written in not good English, sort of Vietnamese English, And the general gist of them is a bit like that. Like, what are you doing here? Because your next door neighbour's having sex with your wife. So why don't you go home and look after your own matters instead of coming here and fucking up things for us, I think they're kind of interesting. So I did a series on that. These are Zippo lighters, which of course are famous and most people know what they are. They all have a slogan on them and a drawing on the other side, and they're dead famous. Some of the slogans are humorous and stuff, Maybe a famous one is, whenever I die, I'll go to heaven because I've spent my life in hell, that kind of thing. A friend of mine donated this to me, part of her collection of Vietnam War memorabilia. She donated it for this art piece. This is a marine knife donated to me by a friend of mine, Mike Hendershot, who lives in LA, and he's a Vietnam vet, and he's got post-traumatic stress disorder from the war, and this was his marine combat knife. So he gave me that for the show. Well, it's mine to keep after the show too. Then, the Queen Bee neon sign is the Queen Bee neon sign from the Bar project, but for all Queen Bee projects. So it's been all around the world, this sign. It's been all around the world because the Bar project has been all around the world. So it's got a lot of history, that sign. I think this is interesting. This is a photograph that a friend of mine, Jamie, sent to me from Hanoi only about 2 months ago. Jamie used to be a Hollywood cameraman in LA, and he moved to live in Hanoi last year, and he taught for a period of time at the film school in Hanoi, and I think he was a bit surprised one morning on his way to work whenever he probably drove up on his motorcycle, and his students were outside taking gun practice. And I think kind of funny in a way, like these cute looking young girls with these big fucking guns, whatever they are, AK-47s or whatever, I don't know. And kind of interesting, she's got her hand over the other one's eye, so she closed her eye to be aiming the gun and stuff. So this is present day Vietnam people still preparing for war. Not that they want to have a war, but they're always ready in case somebody wants to have a war with them. What else? This large collection of small works in the black frames are again kind of 50-50, half my own artwork and half stuff I've collected for research. So in my own artwork there's more recognizable images of war, like this kind of thing. It speaks for itself as an image of war. Then there are stuff not so obviously related to war, like these kind of pornographic images here. And what I'm indicating here, which is like the theme for really all of my work in this show, is like the effects of war, to show that it's more than just what happens in a Hollywood movie, more than just what happens in the battlefield, kind of different from what George Bush likes to present to us as like a black and white sort of thing, that war affects all levels of society. It affects everyday life for people. It affects people not directly involved in the war. It affects society kind of things worldwide. It affects things in other countries even, you know. So like it goes into everyday life. So, and the connection with kind of sex and violence and pornography and all that kind of stuff that goes on. Then stuff that would be memorabilia. Again, these are cards from the Vietnam War. In this case, communist propaganda. And these are kind of crazy, I thought, you know. These cards would say something like, hey American, come to this bar, you can have this beautiful girl, you can have some money, and you can give us some information on marine training or something like that. I can't imagine that any American soldier ever fell for it, because you would know if you went there you would get killed. But anyway, that's what it is, that's what it was used for. These are death cards, which are kind of made famous in the movie Apocalypse Now, because they throw it on the dead communist bodies. But that's what they are, they're death cards, in this case made by American propaganda people, and they would be left around the place for communists to find. The kind of message is obvious, you want to die, you know. So then maybe the last thing that I'll show you is these photographs here. These photographs were got, shall I say, clandestinely or something, under the table in Vietnam. And I think they're interesting. I think they're kind of special, kind of rare, because I don't think anybody can get these ordinarily. These are photographs taken during the war. They might have been used as communist propaganda, and today they don't really want us to see them much because they're pretty hardcore anti-American. But now that the war's over and the two governments are sort of trying to build better relations, this wouldn't be a good thing to help those better relations. So, you know, what's going on here, there's, this is a dead American pilot who's kind of fucked up, you know, from whatever happened to him. This is the communists crashing through the gates of the presidential palace in Saigon. I think every Vietnamese person knows the number of this tank. They get taught this at school. This is one of their great images, propaganda images. This is the tank crew running inside the presidential palace to hoist the Vietnamese flag, and this is famous, everybody knows this. This is the Americans evacuating Saigon. Everybody says it's from the US Embassy in Saigon. I think it's actually not, but people say it is. It's just, I think, some rooftop in Saigon. This is the South Vietnamese army surrendering. That kind of thing. I think that's it.
Cool.
Museum tour ended. Glorious, yeah.